Look who we have here in our humble little WCBS newsroom. Hello, Don Dahler.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing, buddy?
Good to see you.
You know, Don, we all know him as the roving reporter, as the foreign correspondent once upon a time for ABC. He was at Channel 2 for a long time. He's been doing the CBS Evening News. I've seen you in West Virginia last week,
Right.
Parkland, Florida before that. Right. And now you're just catching your breath and hanging with us for a moment. And
Catching
writing.
my breath. Yep.
And writing.
Yes, writing.
By the way, you know what I do? I have a habit of holding the microphone and not giving it to the guest. So you're going to hear a lot of me. And there we go. It's much better. You are writing fiction.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about your newscasts.
Yes.
We're talking about
Not
what
fake
you
news.
do on the side. I don't know how you find time to do it. Nor do I know how you do it, because Don he's got his third book out now. And I've read all three. Yes, I have. Because
That's great.
Because he's a nice guy and I like him, but also because he really can write. I mean, seriously, which amazes me, not because you don't necessarily have the education and the wherewithal, but because we're not trained as broadcasters. We're trained to write short, get to the point, leave a lot of the other detail out. Mm-hmm. And it's exact opposite when you're writing fiction. How do you do that?
Well, it's interesting because I like to write books for fellow travelers. You know, people who are traveling or they don't have a lot of time. They don't want to read a 1,000-page opus. They want to read something that has some quick activity in it, interesting characterizations, but not wordy.
Right.
And so in that sense, I think my journalism background helps somewhat. It also helps in researching the books and that sort of thing. But I do separate those two worlds for me. There was a period of time where I made documentaries which have longer scripts and you can be more descriptive in them. And so there is a crossover there. But it's so beneficial to me. It's so therapeutic to me to write fiction because that's a world and situations I can control. I can't control a kid going into a school and shooting up a school. When I have to report about that, I have to report the facts. I can't save anybody. In my books, I can save people. And it really does help you at the end of the day kind of feel okay about things.
That makes perfect sense when I see your character in the book. Kyle Royce. Kyle Royce, I picture him as being Don Dahler, to be honest with you.
He's much younger, much better looking.
He's this good-looking superhero of a human being who's got a ton of cash, just like Don Dahler.
Right, exactly.
Who, like everybody in broadcasting, who has decided he's going to fix what's wrong with the world. He's going to rescue people who need rescuing. Who's going to drive the coolest Lambos along the way and date swimsuit models along the way. Yeah. He's a guy you kind of want to punch in the face if he wasn't so likable. How did you make a character who you want to just hate him, but he's so cool? I
came up with the original concept of Kyle thinking that if I had all the resources available, how would I use them? And of course, being a human being, I would enjoy them like Kyle does. But some of that, in fact, a lot of that is somewhat of a cover. You know, he does drive sports cars. He lives in a penthouse. He owns the building. He dates interesting, beautiful women. But his real calling in life, because of his background and having lost his parents in mysterious ways, is to help find the unfindable, one person at a time. He's not trying to do it writ large. He's just saying, I can make a difference in one family or one community or one person's life. And so he has a foundation and they go through a number of candidates that have either come to them on appeal or somebody else has told them about it. And then just this foundation that he has, they sit down and they decide who is worthy or who is in so much trouble that the government, the police, the FBI, everybody else has given up on finding this person or people. And that's where this foundation steps in.
You weave 9/11 into it.
Yeah.
He disappears, not the main character, but one of the characters who is presumed to be dead in the attack turns up not to be dead at all, and he used it as a convenient excuse to make a run for it. Right. And in your descriptions of what had happened that day, I guess what I want to ask you is, did you have any trepidation of using 9/11 as a plot line?
I absolutely did, because I was down there, reported, like many of us who were working here in the city and witnessed everything that happened. But what struck me on that during those weeks after 9/11 was how many of the friends and family members of the missing would come up and talk about hoping that they had amnesia, that maybe they'd hit their head, right, or that something happened and they were lost in the paperwork at a hospital, and they clung to that tiny little tendril of hope that they weren't dead. And I remembered thinking back then that if somebody wanted to just go away, there would never be a better moment for them to do that, because there were so many people who were never recovered. The remains were never recovered, and I thought maybe we are far enough from that time where it's not going to feel exploitative, because I didn't want it to be. The book is not about 9/11. It's about a man who seized that moment to try to change his life, and I hope that people who lost someone at that time, I hope they don't read into this story that I am not sympathetic, because I'm enormously sympathetic. I lost friends down there and people I knew. I lived in a building with a firehouse, and most of those firemen didn't come out. But it was an interesting exercise in how would you do it? If you wanted to get away, how would you do that?
And this guy seemingly had all the bases covered, but he was no match for our hero, who goes through, actually, and I love the way you bring in some of the technology that I can't tell from reading your book if that's fact or fiction. Some of the facial recognition technology that is so precise. Is that an imagination, or is that really happening?
That is really happening. Much of the technology that this team uses does exist. Now, not all of it exists for the general consumer.
And how do you know about all this, Don?
Having spent a lot of time with the military, they've got bells and whistles that we have no concept of how sophisticated it is. But facial recognition is out there in an amazing way, and to a degree that we're not even really familiar with.
A little frightening.
Yeah.
Just don't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
You must do a lot of research. I mean, you're just either that or maybe you do own these sports cars that go from 0 to 200 in 6 seconds. I mean, your level of detail is part of what makes it great. It's not bogged down detail. It's you manage to do it in a light, fun way that brings you along for the ride. Some of the places that we visit in this book, which I've never said the name of it yet, by the way. I'm surprised you haven't jumped in there and smacked me. And it's Do a Little Good.
Do a Little Wrong.
Damn it.
That's okay.
Can I say damn it on this thing? Okay. Do a little wrong. Sorry about that. But it's part of a larger quote that I'm messing up. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's Shakespeare from the Merchant of Venice, and it is to do a great right, do a little wrong.
You had to think about it too.
I did. I didn't want to get that first part there wrong, because all of my Shakespearean scholar friends would come down on me. But that was the whole idea. This foundation and Kyle Royce, they are willing to break the law, to bend the law, to do extra legal activities, to do international illegal activities, all in the pursuit of their mission, which is to find the missing. And so that, when I was starting to write the book, I didn't have a title for it yet. And then that came to me one day. I remembered hearing it somewhere and had to look it up because I wasn't sure which author had actually written that. But it was interesting to me that it was Shakespeare, because in some ways this is a Shakespearean story.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned international travel, and that's what I was going to get to before I flummoxed the name of your book. And that is, our hero is in Rio at one point. Our hero is in the Bahamas at one point. Please tell me that for your research, you had to go there.
Unfortunately, no. I had no budget on this particular book. My first two books, A Tight Lie and Water Hazard, I had an expense account with the publisher. And this one, I was putting it up myself. Mm-hmm. So no, but I have been to those places. And so through going online and also reading books, I was able to refresh my memory about certain aspects of these cities and these places that in order to give that kind of authentic detail that, like the park that he met his source in Europe, and those kinds of things that I wanted to be able to make it real. If anybody ever happened to go there, I wanted them to say, hey, this is how he wrote it.
When you're crashing a piece for the CBS Evening News on deadline, you have, I don't know, minutes, sometimes, to put it together. When you're writing a novel, a couple hundred pages, what's your process? What's your time frame? How do you do it?
That's what is also therapeutic about it for me. I spend a lot of time at airports, on airplanes, sitting on the tarmac. I spend a lot of time in hotel rooms, and then I make some time on the weekends when I'm deep into a project like this. So the research is very enjoyable to kind of start trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it. But I'm not one of these writers that does all the little Post-it notes on the wall and plots it all out to the nth degree. I'm more like Lee Child. He and I had a conversation a while back because he was kind enough to read one of my first books and do a little write-up on it, blurb on it. And I've always loved his stories. Jack Reacher's just a great, all-time great character. But he was talking about that writing a novel is a journey of discovery for the writer sometimes. And that's what it is for me, where I kind of know the beginning character, the main plot line, and maybe where it's going to end up, although not always. But I kind of know, okay, I'm going to send him out in this direction and see what happens. And sometimes you go down the rabbit hole and you say, nah, this is not working. I got to do something else here. Or what that does is then you got to figure out how you're going to get the character out of that situation. So it's not deeply thought out ahead of time where, they teach you in writing class to do your outline and then do it deeper and then do it deeper, and then eventually your outline becomes your whole book. That's not how I write. I write more kind of trying to find out what this guy is going to do myself, and rather than knowing exactly all the way.
As we on the air sometimes ad-lib ourselves into a box or into a hole, do you ever write yourself into that hole where you're like, yeah, I'm not going this way. I'm going to abandon this story.
Yeah. And in fact, there were certain aspects with Kyle. It is exactly as you described it. He's kind of a guy you want to punch in the face if he didn't have this altruistic side of him. And so I was on a razor's edge with him in terms of acceptable attributes for a wealthy young playboy that A, wasn't cliched, and B, wasn't so dislikable that people were going to go, well, I don't care what this guy does. I just don't like this guy. And so there were certain things that I would write that he would do, and I was like, yeah, no, my wife would not like this guy.
I wondered about that. Your wife or your kids, or your public, people who think they know you. Yeah. And through your writing, we're really getting into a peek into your fantasies, how your mind works. Yeah. Are there things? So I guess that answers the question. There are things you'll pull back from. It's not a complete expose of your soul. Yes,
exactly. And these characters aren't me. As much as I wish I was as resourceful and dashing and funny as he is.
Every guy reading that wants that character to be him.
Yes, yeah, and wants his girlfriend to be theirs. I know, and that, yeah, and there's a certain voyeurism involved in that as well. The main characters that I write, though, ultimately are guys I'd like to hang out with, and maybe even guys that I envy in a way. Even the deeply flawed character Huck Doyle in my first two novels, a failed lawyer who's almost a failed professional golfer, but he's clinging to his PGA card by the skin of his teeth, has a lot of family issues that he deals with. But he's a guy that ultimately I would really enjoy sitting and talking to. And that's my measure for a main character is A, someone who's doing something interesting, and B, someone who is interesting themselves.
That would be you.
Yeah, I wish.
Don Dahler, great talking to you. So it's called Not a Tight Lie. That was the first one. Water Hazard was the second one. Right. See, I read these books. Yes. This is called Do a Little Wrong, and it's wherever you get your books, right?
Well, right now it's exclusive to Amazon.
It's only on Amazon.
But hopefully that'll get broader. But right now it's on Amazon.com.
Yeah, it's a great read.
Thank you.